Tidal Flooding Talk, which is a weekly show here at the Irish Pub dedicated to the challenges of coastal flooding.
And I'm meteorologist Dan Skeldon, proudly saying there's no nor'easters, no winter storms, no snow in our forecast. And every week we are here Tuesday, 7-ish, let's say. Sometimes a few minutes late. Usually it's my fault why we're late. These guys are on time. These guys were here and I was about 100 miles away last time. So at least I'm here this time. And this guy right here is our guest tonight.
Thomas Heist of Thomas Heist Insurance Agency. He's been in the business for what, 30 years now?
30 years now, yes. Still rolling along.
So, I mean, insurance and flooding kind of go hand in hand as well. So, I mean, Tom is expert in everything insurance and an Ocean City business person, an Ocean City resident?
Ocean City resident,
Ocean City
yes.
resident, and for how long?
25 years.
25 years. So you're pretty tuned in with tidal flooding.
Yes, very much so.
All right, and hopefully
Fortunately or unfortunately, yes, long time.
Right. So we invite you to ask Tom questions, or Palma or myself questions as well, and we have a whole lineup of questions we ask him. Each week we bring you a different guest, something related to tidal flooding. We've had meteorologists, we've had researchers on, and now our insurance expert. And hopefully you'll never need insurance, but odds are
We're here if you do.
15 rounds of tidal flooding this month of March alone. People get impacted by it, and we've had some big storms, and those big ticket storms kind of serve a purpose of waking us up to our vulnerability and hopefully preparing people for their needs. As always, Palma, the first question.
So, Tom, how did you get started in the insurance industry, flood insurance, helping people out with that?
Well, it's a family business. The business has been around for 50 years. My father was involved, and I decided it was a path I wanted to follow as well. So I got into the insurance business, and being at the coast, flood insurance is such a big part of what we do, and we decided, hey, we're experts, let's just really sink our teeth in and do a good job in educating our customers and really the public, because it's very confusing.
Now, what has like Sandy and Jonas and some of the big ticket items we've done, has it made it more confusing, less confusing? And what's been the impact of those big storms as far as the public awareness, in flood insurance goes?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been selling flood insurance policies for a long time, but we didn't have a lot of claims. And after Sandy, we had over 3,500 claims. And you have to become very good at every aspect of the policy very quickly. So we were prepared. We have a very strong staff, very knowledgeable people. But those storms really brought to mind how important it is to know the coverage and be able to communicate people how to save money, how to really just to understand how their policy works, how to process claims, if they have a big claim, how to elevate their home. So there's really a lot of pieces to it.
Okay. Now, what are a few ways that homeowners can save on their flood insurance?
That's another great question. I think the most important thing that people should do is have an elevation certificate. They go to their surveyor and they order it. It usually takes maybe a week or two. And a lot of times people say, isn't that going to be expensive? It normally costs anywhere between $250 and maybe $450, but it provides a lot of information. It's really the key piece to not only rating the policy and knowing what the cost will be, but also to see where the problems are with the structure that we can identify and say, hey, if you do this, this, and this, we can lower your rate.
Now, a weather-based follow-up question to that: Does the elevation certificate help homeowners with assessing, when the weather forecasts come out, minor, moderate flooding? I mean, is that a document that can help them ascertain, all right, what's my flood risk in certain storms?
Yes, absolutely. Every policy will identify the zone that the person lives in, and along the barrier islands, we're in what's called a special flood hazard area. And in that area, there's essentially 3 zones. There's the V zone, which is it's the high velocity zone. It's the people that are closest to the bay or the ocean. The V zone says that FEMA expects wave action to be greater than 1.5 feet. So you have the most exposure to a, first line of defense of water. The people behind that are in the A zone, It's called the accumulation zone. You're usually a little bit higher off the ground, and you're less likely to have a flood. But, people in the A zone have floods too. The highest part of the island is called the X zone, and those people technically are not in a flood zone. We always recommend everyone that lives along a barrier island to get a flood policy. It's a lot cheaper if you're in an X zone, but they are the highest, live on the highest part of the island.
What would you say, and one more follow-up question, what's the percentage of people in the X zone that have insurance? I mean, is it like, all right, I live in a barrier island, I should have flood insurance, or hey, I'm in the X zone, I'm immune? I mean, is there a percentage?
I would say right now, most of the people that are in the X zone have a policy only because the X zone is brand new. It came out with the brand new maps, and the maps have only been adopted in Cape May County. I would say probably in the next year they'll be adopted in Atlantic County as well. But the people in Atlantic County are just finding out they're in the X zone. Prior to that, they were in the A zone, and they had to have a flood policy. So maybe at their next renewal, they may decide. As a matter of fact, some people are getting notification from the mortgage company saying you're in an X zone, you no longer need a flood policy, and those people are making a decision whether they want to buy that policy or not.
Do we have any questions from our Facebook viewers?
I've seen a couple. Roger Cope wants to know, is the beer any good at the pub? And of course,
the beer is delicious here at the pub.
Yeah,
how about a little bit about the Irish Pub, which of course is one of our sponsors, in addition to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition. Why don't you handle the Irish Pub, and I'll talk a little bit about the coalition.
Sure. So every week we are here at the Irish Pub, which is in Atlantic City, 164 South St. James Place. If you can't make it here in person, you can stream us live on Facebook and ask your questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we can.
All right, Ben Murphy wants to know, have the new flood maps helped your business? I mean, do they drive more people to insurance? You're in an X zone, do they drive people from insurance, or has it maybe just clarified your business?
Yeah, I don't think they've helped our business. I think they've brought awareness to people that they live in a flood zone. I would say most people have benefited by the new flood maps. There was a lot of homeowners who lived in the V zone. With the new map, they're in an A zone. And some people in the A zone have moved to the X zone. So I think more people have benefited from the new maps. I don't think it's really brought in more customers. I think at the end of the day, we might actually have less customers because the people may choose not to buy a flood policy in the X zone.
Well, what's the difference? Like, let's say I live in an X zone versus a V zone. What's the difference in policy costs? I mean, I guess it depends on island to island and home to home. I mean, it might not be a standard conversion rate, but what type of exponential or multiplying factor are you talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on the structure, the height of the structure. There's really two classifications. There's pre-firm, firm meaning flood insurance rate map, and post-firm. So the older homes had no requirement to elevate. Some of them were on the ground, some of them are up in the air, but the city didn't require a home to be elevated. So those people are traditionally lower than the post-firm properties. A home becomes a post-firm property 12/31/74. So every home after essentially 1/1/75 had to be built to a certain level. The higher homes get the cheapest premiums. So if you're a low-lying home in a V zone, you could be paying $6,000. You could eventually pay $8,000. If you're up in the air in a V zone, you could be paying $3,500. If you're in an A zone, you're going to be somewhere between $600 and if you're elevated, and if you're not elevated, it could be in the low twos, 2,000 up to maybe even high twos. The X zone, it's probably $400. So there's a big difference.
Quite a range.
And it depends on the height of the structure. Every inch counts with FEMA, believe it or not.
Well, what's the best advice? I have friends who live in Ocean City who are on they flooded in Sandy, and they rebuilt, and it's a slab, so they're not elevated. What's the advice? I mean, is elevate the best advice to anyone who's low? Obviously, it's a very costly endeavor, but so too is paying V-zone premiums, with a low elevation. So what's the best course for those people who are low to begin with, and let's say in a B or an A zone?
Well, one, just know your risk. There's a lot of people who have pre-firm homes that do not have an elevation certificate, and FEMA doesn't require it for the pre-firm homes. But we always say go out and get it and give it to your insurance agent, and they'll calculate the premium based upon that elevation certificate. And some people are going to get a cheaper premium. I had a customer that was paying almost $3,000. They bought this elevation certificate for $250, and the new premium came in about $700. I couldn't get enough hugs and kisses from that person. They said for 10 years I've been paying this high premium. So know your risk. Spend the money, get the elevation certificate, and after that you may find out that you have to do some simple things. Maybe you have to put some flood vents in, maybe you have to add a little bit of fill onto your home, but sometimes there's some simple things that will allow you to get a better rate. FEMA will never penalize you by turning in an elevation certificate. It can only benefit you. So what we do is we send it in, and every year FEMA will calculate with the elevation certificate, without, and they will give you the better rate. And at some point, because without an elevation certificate, FEMA's just guessing where the home lies. It's kind of giving you the worst rate. And at some point, that elevation certificate will take over and cap off the increases. So, great.
You brought up flood vents. Could you elaborate on that? What's the difference between flood vents and the old air vents?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of the old homes, I mean really up until about 5 years ago, had air vents. And an air vent is essentially just normally a slider vent that you open and close in the winter to let the air flow. In the summer, you let the air flow under the home so that your joists don't rot. But essentially, water cannot penetrate an air vent. And there's the new flood vents. As soon as the water comes up to that level, there's a ballast inside them. And the whole vent flips open and allows the water pressure to ease into the home. And FEMA wants vents because they believe if there's pressure just pushing against the foundation, it can actually cause damage to the foundation and really the entire structure. If the water can't get in and equalize that pressure. So that's the whole premise behind flood vents.
Interesting. Paula Sabati wants to know if you were located in the flood zone and you have your house lifted. I mean, she says, can you save on the insurance costs? And obviously,
yes.
Probably yes, but how significant saving is it? And I mean, is it worth it? You in the insurance business?
Well,
we'll have some home elevators on in the future too. But is it something where, all right, it's a good decision, or is it a case by case basis?
No, it really is a case by case. Even if you save, you go from $3,000 down to $600. You're still paying $2,500. I mean, you're saving $2,500, but it could cost you $80,000 or $100,000 to elevate your property. So it's going to take you a long time to realize that savings. I think it really just depends. There's some grant money out there. The money is available for the homes that have had the most repetitive loss. And I would say if your home has had 4 claims over $5,000 or 2 or more claims over the value of your home. And when I say the value of your home, I mean the appraised. When you look at your tax bill, you have a land value and you have a structure value or improvement value. FEMA looks at that improvement value as the value of your home. So if you've had 2 or more claims that exceed that value, you will be eligible for FEMA money to elevate your home. FEMA is trying to do 2 things. They're trying to get all the lowest homes up in the air, and they're trying to improve their mapping so that they can give people more accurate rates.
I'm guessing they're going to accomplish the second thing first, right?
Exactly.
Probably getting the more accurate mapping.
Exactly.
Let's see.
The money flows slowly, but we're starting to see that.
Right. Another question on here. Ben Murphy again. Why some mainland areas like Beasley's Point are included in flood maps? And that's because, and you can address this too. I mean, flooding, obviously, you don't have to live on a barrier island to experience tidal flooding.
Really, it's just access to water. It could be your bay water, it could be riverine. There's a lot of people in the United States that are exposed to the potential flood loss. But what's interesting is 25% of all of the flood damage across the country happens in non-flood areas. And I remember about 15 years ago, there was a heavy rainstorm out by Seaview Country Club, and I think they had 14, 15 inches in about an hour. That entire neighborhood was completely inundated with water, and every home had flood water in their living room, their kitchen, in their living space. That was probably the worst flood that I had ever seen, believe it or not. It was worse than Sandy in some cases.
Right.
So floods happen everywhere. They happen in every state. They can happen really anywhere.
Yeah, well, I remember the one you mentioned. It's a flash flood from a thunderstorm where I think at Mays Landing back in like '99 there was like 15 inches of rain in a few hours. And yeah, you will get the the flooding. Granted, it occurs more often along the shore,
It
but
does.
I think very few places in this country are immune to it.
Very few. And Vermont had a humongous flood loss. They lost bridges. They lost homes. So
And that was in Irene, and they were hit harder in Irene, and they're a landlocked state. And I mean, Irene made landfall in New Jersey, and Vermont had it worse than us. Go figure.
And they're up in a mountain.
Right.
So you think the people in the mountain would be immune to flood?
Just a personal question I have: is there a type? I mean, is flood insurance honestly more enjoyable? What do you like better? I mean, because you do homeowners insurance and you do auto insurance. Like, how is flood insurance different? Is it more complicated? Is it more interesting and intriguing to you? How has that changed since that's become a little more in the focal point?
Yeah, that's a great question. Flood insurance is very complicated for the consumer to understand. We've been doing it a long time, and we're actually still learning. I mean, we go to continuing education courses all the time. So it's so complicated that we feel good when we're communicating to people how to save money. I love to save people money. I mean, nothing really makes you happier. One is saving you money, and two is covering your loss when you've paid for a policy. So that's our goal. And flood insurance, unfortunately, is something that people on the barrier islands have to buy, and it makes us feel good when we can give them the best rates.
So, what municipalities are now doing is they're part of the CRS program. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. The CRS program is a government program that FEMA runs that really encourages each community to take steps to mitigate against future damage. And there's lots of pieces to it. There's a program for public information. They just want everyone in the communities to understand their risk of flooding. They want people to buy insurance. They want communities to fix the drainage problems. They want communities to have a strong dune system. They want high bulkheads. They want evacuation plans. So every community along the barrier islands that participates in the CRS, and most of them do, get points. And the more activities a community does, the more points they get, and the more discount is available for all the people who live in that community.
And I believe right now the gold standard along the Jersey Shore is
Seattle City.
That's right.
I mean, they're amazing. Seattle City just achieved a Class 3, which provides all residents a 35% discount on their flood policy. Most of the other towns are at a 25%. Some of them are moving towards 30, but Seattle City is the gold standard right now, 35%.
Do you think it's reasonable where, in the future, in the near future, we could all be on Seattle City's level?
I do.
We could all be around 35%?
I do. I think 5 years ago, the gold standard was 15%. And most of the communities have surpassed that to 20 to 25%. Seattle just got to 35%. And I think because Sandy really bought this whole idea that the big loss can happen. No one kind of thought that we're going to have a major flood. And Sandy, brought that to our attention, and now the communities are taking steps to really further protect residents.
I always say Sandy wasn't a good thing by any stretch, but there was kind of a perceived sense of immunity, in New Jersey, because it was so long since our last major event. And obviously, since the storm of '62,
Yes.
All the shore towns
50 years
have changed dramatically. So,
Yes.
so one thing it did was, give us a measuring stick, wake us up a little bit, and help us raise awareness of education. And out of the Hurricane Sandy came the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, 501c3 nonprofit, working for you, every day to basically raise awareness, increase education, and basically save you money too. And that's the whole point of the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, of Tidal Flooding Talk, and of a lot of the other projects that the New Jersey Coastal Coalition is undertaking. And when they get made public, I can't release anything till all our hard work is done and everything's final. I think some great things are happening with the coalition, and therefore for coastal residents around the shore, and visitors as well.
I'd like to just add that the Coastal Coalition has brought the communities together, not only to share information, but we hope soon that our ability to help everyone communicate the same message will actually act as a multiplier for all the participating towns to get additional CRS points and discounts for all residents.
And I think that's a very important point. We always joke in the broadcasting business that we in the broadcasting business, the communication business, are always very bad at communicating. So here you have all these shore towns up and down the Jersey Shore, boroughs and towns and cities, and all these governments, and they weren't communicating, and now they are, and it's just so much more effective when you're all meeting and talking and trying to work towards a common goal. Because obviously every town, from Harvey Cedars to Brigantine, right on down to Wildwood, they want the same thing. They want to save their money residents. They want to keep their residents safe, property safe, lives safe, and I think it's great that everyone's come together in that common goal.
And they're learning from each other.
Right.
Every community has strengths, and some have weaknesses. And I think by being at the table, they're each learning from each other how to mitigate against future damage. It's really fun to watch, actually.
Any last minute questions?
Well, I do think that the New Jersey Coastal Coalition's main goal is outreach and getting this information out there for everyone. So do you find that your agency is also working with the public, trying to keep everyone informed on these changes? And
We are. We're doing a couple things. One, we just send a lot of notifications to our own customers. We have a lot of customers in South Jersey, and we want them to get the best rate. We send information, and we help them to make decisions about how to spend their money wisely. I'm sure I forgot what else I was going to add to that.
Happens all the time. I'll cut two more questions on Facebook, and then we'll wrap up this edition of Tidal Flooding Talk, unless you have a last-minute question. Ben wants to know, did the wind damage deductibles, are they going to come?
I don't think so. There's a lot of competition with regard to wind. Wind is covered under a fire policy, and I think if anything, that has gotten better over the last few years. After Sandy and after Katrina really was the big one, Hugo and Katrina, most insurance companies just started to slap on 2%, 5% deductibles. And when I say 2%, it's 2% of your building value. So we're starting to see companies actually lower that to sometimes 1%. Very rare cases it's a flat deductible, but I do not see in the immediate future more or higher windstorm deductibles.
And then Kristen Kaiser, this is an inland homeowner. If a homeowner in an inland area, let's say Pennsylvania, which got some flooding from Irene, has flooding around them, but not at their direct residence, what can they do? I think as a meteorologist, I would say, and you said it, even inland areas can flood.
Yeah.
So if you're flooding or your neighbors are flooding in an event, you may have gotten lucky that time, but maybe that wakes you up to say, all right, maybe there could be flooding in my residence.
Yeah, look at how your land drains. If you're inland, you might want to change your drainage pattern. If you have a basement that leaks, you want to kind of shore that up, find out why it's leaking. So there are some proactive steps. Make sure your sump pump works. But inland people definitely have flood. So,
okay. Tom Heist, another wonderful guest. We love having you here, and you're on the board of directors of the New Jersey Coastal Coalition as well, and he is the insurance guru of Ocean City and up and down the Jersey Shore. Everyone knows Tom Heist's jingle as well. Right? I sing it and hum it sometimes.
We don't need to do that.
No, we're not going to do that?
We don't need to do that here.
Okay.
Now,
well,
before
thank you so
we
much
wrap
for
this
coming.
up, we do have a gift from Tidal Flooding Talk to Tom Heist, and that is, of course, an Irish pub t-shirt.
Oh, awesome. I might put it on tonight and have a beer.
Oh, you have to. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's very nice.
Since you can't drink in Ocean City, right? You might as well while you drink in Atlantic City. And next week, I believe we have Scott Evans the Atlantic City Fire Chief, who has been through many a flood himself, and as a first responder, will give us a different angle as to what he has dealt with, what he has seen. It doesn't respond to just fires. I mean, the Atlantic City Fire Department and police and first responders, deal with tidal flooding, every nor'easter and every storm. So looking forward to his unique perspective in that role. So that will be next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Always come on down to the Irish Pub, join us. And yeah, Roger asked, the beer is great down here. And feel free to join us for a beer after the show, ask a question live as well. And we should be here next Tuesday. Hopefully, I think we're done with winter storms. Although I will tease that I do think there's going to be some snowflakes the first 10 days of April. That'd probably not be too popular if I tease that, but does that get you guys excited? Snow in April?
I love snow.
Interested, but not excited.
Yeah, a little bit pressed, probably, is more the better word. But for Palma, Accardi, and myself, and Tom Heist, we thank you guys for tuning in. And if you did stop on down, we'll see you as soon as the off button is pressed. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.